Let's continue on. If no question, got any question? Okay. Now we only have time to touch here a few things to highlight regarding this covenant here. But let me just draw to your attention. First of all, the core of covenant promise. The core of covenant promise. What is the core of it? First of all, the core, the center of the covenant promise is found in Genesis 17, verse 7. It says here that I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come. To be your God and the God of your descendants or the God of your seed. Okay, the word seed in Hebrew is zera'l, after you. Now, once again, recall just now, rearrange your thought now. Genesis chapter 12 is first time God called Abraham out of his hometown. Genesis 15, God re-established his covenant with him and tell him to go and count the stars and say that your heir is from your own bloodline, not other people, not mixed bloodline. And Abraham believed and God gave to him righteousness, credited to him righteousness. Genesis 2017. Genesis 17 was where God tells him about the covenant, the sign of the covenant, which is circumcision. Okay, in here, in verse 7, he says here the things that he just said here. And then in Genesis chapter 22, later on, you will see the sacrifice of Isaac. All right. Now, here, I want you to look here. You need to imprint inside you, store it inside your mind, because you will see these kind of languages used after this again and again. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant here. Okay, and this refers to the covenant of grace because it pours out grace to the fallen human being. It's not just between me and you, A and B, but me and you and your descendants. So who are you? You are like the class monitor. You are like the federal head. You are like the representative from you and your whole descendants after you for generations to come, because you are like the head of the entire line, lineage. To be your God and the God of your descendants after you. To be your God and the God of your seed after you. Now here are all covenantal language, which you need to store in your mind. I will be your God, you will be my people. Okay, these are covenant of grace repeated literally over and over again throughout the Old Testament and New Testament, all the way even until the last page of the Bible in Revelation 21 verse 3. It says, they will be his people and God himself will be with them and will be their God. Do you see that? Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people and he will dwell with them, right? So anyone can guess what does this show? Why is it that we see in Old Testament, Genesis, and the last book of the Bible, Revelation, we still see this language here? What is this showing? Okay, now this is very important in showing, write down if you are taking notes, in showing continuity. Continuity. So when you read the Bible, it is not a Bible that is broken up to 66 different stories. No, it's one single story that is being divided into 66 parts or 66 ways of expressing the same thing. Okay, so it's just one single story. This is to show the continuity of the covenant of grace of God throughout the whole Bible, right? And secondly, a covenant that is being ratified by blood, a covenant that is being ratified by blood, sealed by blood. In Genesis 15, just now we have already read, we have seen a vision where God appeared in the smoke, in the smoking pot and fire, right? And passed between the pieces of animals that are being sacrificed and take upon himself the oaths and the curse that will fulfill his word. Now remember here, look at here, verse 17. When the sun has set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. And by this time, right, Abraham, if you look at Genesis chapter 15, you will find that Abraham was already sound asleep. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, to your descendants, I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. Okay, so here it tells us that these pieces of animal that have been torn, bloodshed, And then the covenant was formalized, made into formal use or effective by that blood. Okay? Sealed by that blood. And the covenant is being sealed here. And even though Abraham did not do anything yet, God just made it happen. Okay? Now, that is the initiative that God took. And then God, and what else? Number 3, the gospel promise in the covenant of grace includes household principle. It's always a household that is being involved, family that is being involved. We see again in the gospel promise in the covenant of grace includes the household principle. The promise is being extended to Abraham and his children. Between me and your seed, your zera'l, after you, for the generations to come, to be your God, and you will be my people, and I to be your God, the God of your seed as well, your zera'l as well, after you. So the element of covenant of grace continues into the New Testament, as we have seen just now. Okay, so as we saw the last time also, Peter also used the same words in Genesis 17 verse 7 when he preached the gospel. In Acts chapter 2 verse 39, this is what Peter said on the day of Pentecost. He stood up and he said, the promise is for you and your children, and for all who are far off. Remember, I told you before, the word promise, you want to see the promise, you must remember covenant. This covenant promise is for you and your children, for those who are far off also, for those all whom the Lord our God will call. Far off, who are far off, basically it refers to the Gentiles, the non-Jews, people who are outside of the inner circle, all who are far off. Okay, you will see that repeated in Ephesians as well. And then number 4, the sign and the seal of the gospel promise is given to the children. Since the promise of the covenant is to his children, Abraham's children, then the sign and the seal of the gospel promise for Abraham's case was circumcision, is also given to his children. And we see that in Genesis 17 verse 11. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And then he goes on to command that it will be given to his sons and those in the household. Every male servant also must be circumcised. In Romans 4:11, Paul calls circumcision, look here, and he received circumcision as a sign, a seal of the righteousness that he had by believing or by faith while he was still uncircumcised. So, the imputed righteousness was given to him even before he was circumcised. But after he received the imputed righteousness, he, by obedience, circumcised. Are you with me? Why? This is a sign and the seal of the righteousness that has already been given to you. A sign and seal of the righteousness that has already been given to you. Okay, so once again, the sign of the promise does not presume regeneration. Just because you have the sign, everyone who's circumcised doesn't mean that everyone is regenerated. Just because you're born in a household doesn't mean that you are regenerated. Just because your body carries a sign that you're circumcised, it doesn't mean that you're generated. Today, for Christians, just because you are baptized doesn't mean that you are regenerated. Even though regeneration should happen first, and then you exhibit it with the sign of the promise, even though it's supposed to be like that. So having sign does not mean you are guaranteed saved. Saved, guaranteed, is only when you believe. That's why we refer back to Genesis 17 verse 6 just now. Abraham believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Okay? So having the sign does not guarantee saved. Not all will receive the promise with faith. Both Ishmael and Isaac, for example, they received the sign of the covenant. Abraham circumcised both of them. Okay? But Ishmael was an unbeliever, and Isaac is a believer. And then we see the same for Jacob and Esau. Nevertheless, so Jacob was a believer, Esau was not a believer. He despised his own birthright with just a pot of food that can only fulfill him for some time, but after that he will still die. So nevertheless, the command is to give the sign to his children. This is absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary. All right. Now, let me jump out and make a quick reference to the New Covenant or the New Testament. And after that, we'll jump back to our discussion. In the New Covenant is also the same. All right. Just now I said to you, not everyone who carry the sign of baptism, which is a sign of the New Covenant, sign and seal of the righteousness of faith, is a believer. Okay. So I said that already. Now let's jump back. In Genesis chapter 17, verse 14, it says, any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So we will see this later in Exodus. It will be illustrated. For example, in Exodus 4, 24 to 26, you will see that even Moses, okay, his sons were circumcised. Right? God came to kill Moses because he did not circumcise his son. And this will be very important when we come to our study of the New Testament. All right, now that is the part about the covenant with Abraham. And now we enter into the final part, which is the coming Redeemer or redemption that is promised through Abraham. So we must consider the coming of the Redeemer and the coming of the redemption. If you have a Redeemer, means you must have redemption. And it is promised through Abraham. So God's promise of blessing to Abraham extended to him or through him to the whole world. And we see that in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, because it says in the end of the verse that in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Okay? And this promise would only be fulfilled unless there must be a seed of Abraham that is going to continue on, isn't it? Unless there must be a coming Redeemer, coming seed that's going to redeem this part. And who is the coming Redeemer? Jesus Christ. He is also called the Son of Abraham. How do we know that Jesus is the Son of Abraham? In the first verse of the first book of the New Testament, Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Already said. And then in Galatians chapter 3, verse 14, he has redeemed us, Jesus has redeemed us in order that the blessing given to Abraham might come to the Gentiles through Christ Jesus. So you see, once again, the covenant is one single unified thing. From the Old Testament to the New Testament with perfect continuity, and there is nothing that is contradicting. And later on in Galatians chapter 3, you will see that if you belong to Christ, if you are a Christian, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So you see, once again, you see this theme about the seed that is being promised in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. It is still being carried forward from to Abraham and then to Abraham's seed, his descendants. And then it ultimately leads to Jesus Christ. And then you see in Galatians chapter 3, verse 14, this one, right? Through Christ, this same promise for Abraham by God about the seed now leads to the Gentiles. See, might come to the Gentiles. Okay, the Gentiles, the people that are non-Jews, the people that are non-circumcised, it will come to the Gentile believers and also their children because of the household principle. So as you can see, okay, the promise was never intended to be restricted to the Jews. Some people say, oh, I know Christianity started with Abraham and all those Old Testament ones. They are the Jews, okay? They are the special elite, you know. It is through them and that somehow we believe in Jesus. So Jesus also is a Jew, okay? We believe in Jesus. But how is it possible and why is it that non-Jews also can become part of Jesus? Then we are stuck there. Okay, but the Bible is very clear. The promise was never intended to be restricted to the Jews, even though it was started with the Jews, which is Abraham. Okay, it's not restricted to physical bloodlines, but it's supposed to be extended to all those with sound and saving faith in the gospel of Christ. That's why just now I said what is the thing that get you to heaven? It's not the works that you've done. It's not the baptism that you have performed or the circumcision that you have performed. But it is through the sound and saving faith to believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that is what will save you. Okay, Romans chapter 4, verse 13, it was not through the law that Abraham and his seed or his offspring received the promise. Okay, once again, you see the promise, you must ask the covenant. That he would be heir of the world, but through the righteousness that comes by faith. By faith. Right? So therefore, Gentile believers like you and I, you are Chinese, right? You are not Jews, right? Any one of you are Jew here? Any one of you is a Jew here? Okay, got it. Let me see who. Anyone? Just because you feel like a Jew, you are still not a Jew, huh? Okay, just because you sing Hebrew song is not a Jew. Okay, no. Okay, nobody is Jew. Good. So if nobody is a Jew, then Gentile believers are only true children of Abraham and heirs of his promise only through Jesus. Only through Jesus. Right? So Galatians chapter 3, verse 7 and verse 9, let's look at it again. It says, understand then that those who have faith are children of Abraham, not those who have circumcised, those who have faith. Okay, scripture foresaw that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, not by circumcision. Because Abraham was also justified by faith, not by circumcision. And then he announced the gospel in advance to Abraham that all nations will be blessed through you. So those who rely on faith are blessed along with Abraham, who is the man of faith or the father of faith. All right? So all of this underlines to us, for us, in a way in which God's revelation to the period of Abraham, during Abraham's time, it points us forward to there is a redeemer that must come through the lineage of Abraham, right? Which is Christ, and to the redemption that would only come through him. But of course, we also need a very specific example, like I said just now. Yes, we know that it will come through him. Yes, but exactly how did it happen? Why is Abraham's sin can suddenly be covered? How is it possible? This is where we're going to conclude tonight. The life of Abraham, we're going to look at this. Okay, we consider one very exciting event in the life of Abraham. Which event do you think is the most exciting, one of the most exciting event of Abraham's life? So exciting that actually it is really a gush of adrenaline as you read his story. Which one? Okay, it is about what? The sacrifice of Isaac. The sacrifice of Isaac.